Local productions seen on Delta College Public Media are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Redford, and this is the follow-up. Coming up on tonight's show, mass deportations of illegal immigrants closing down the southern border and a threat to ban birthright citizenship rights. President Trump is fulfilling a campaign promise to change things up on the immigration front. Tonight we have two guests who work in the front lines of this important and volatile issue. But first, we would like to hear from you to help drive the discussion here on the show. You can do that in a variety of ways via social media. On Facebook, you can email us. You can dial into our follow-up hotline to voice your opinion or suggest future show topics. And if you'd like to watch any of our past shows this season, just log on to deltapublicmedia.org. Our guest tonight, my good friend Daniel Soza, joins me in the studio. He is a refugee team lead with Samaritas Refugee Services. Good to see you again, Daniel.
Thank you.
And joining us virtually on the big screen, Oscar Castenada with the Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation. Good to see you as well, Oscar.
Hi, good to see you.
Got a lot to talk about, so let's get into it. So President Trump is doing exactly what he said he would do on the campaign trail on immigration once he took office. And the reality of it is the majority of Americans support most of what he's doing, closing down access to the southern border and calling for the mass deportation of undocumented immigrants, starting with those with criminal records first. So coming at you two guys and the work that you do, let's start there. What are your thoughts on what's happened here in the last week, Daniel?
Yeah. So first I would say that a lot of these people that are being affected are not coming here illegally, right? So many of these people have what's called legal presence, and their cases they're in flux. You know, they're here to have their case heard as a refugee. So they're not necessarily deporting people who are here illegally. One of the stories that came out, I think the first day or two of the administration, was there was a plane of refugees coming from Afghanistan. Some of those people on that plane were what we call unaccompanied minors. So people who, in some cases, don't have any parents, young people. And many of those young people, their parents died because they were allies of the United States against the Taliban. Many of those refugees coming here were allies of the United States against the Taliban, and those people were turned away. They had the documentation, they had a flight booked, and that flight was canceled. Mm-hmm. And so there was absolutely zero that was illegal about them coming to the United States. But they are immigrants, they are refugees, and they were turned away. So I would say that part of that statement is problematic, because that's not exactly what's happening. So people who have followed the process are in fact being deported.
So Oscar, I'm sure you could add to that, so go ahead.
Yeah, the fact that they keep talking about immigrants and this labeling that they put of they are criminals, they didn't come the right way, is much more complex than this, and it's just political ping pong. And it's been, since I started to get involved in things, it's been 20 years, and nobody is willing to create a real and effective, comprehensive solution to the problem. So you just see patchwork here, patchwork there, different policies depending on who is in charge. Um and so people migrates, as Dan said, they come following the law. They come with the law the way it is today. And then they come and they have to wait for a working permit for 12, 15 months before getting the opportunity to work the way they want to work. So they end up going in those different paths to do things. I keep saying, if you come as an asylee, as a refugee, and you can get a working permit in 2 months, they will be building lives, and they will be doing what was done in the United States for generations, for hundreds of years. But the system is broken, and because the system is broken, they never get a fair chance.
Right. And the other thing people will say is that, we hear this all the time, if they do come over the border illegally and they're granted asylum, it takes years before they would get a court date. Mm-hmm. Sort of, how is that possible? Why did it take so long? And Oscar, if you want to add to that, not enough courts, not enough good lawyers. I mean, do you want to go down that path a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Um, So I want to start by saying that USCIS, the entity that deals with immigration, is self-sustained. You know, everything that you do through the system costs, and it costs a lot of money. You know, to renew a working permit today is $485, and you have most people has to renew their working permit every 2 years. Applying for an American visa is, I don't remember the exact number, but in Central America is $160 for the application, and your chances of getting a visa are super slim. So the system is self-sustained. It doesn't cost dollars to the American government, but yet they don't make it grow and they don't make it effective. And as I mentioned before in a different conversation, in Michigan there are three courts to deal with immigrants in Michigan. Three, and with this huge amount of immigrants. So if you apply for asylum, your court day might be easily in 2 years. Uh, and then you have people sitting there waiting to get there in court, and they want to work, they want to be productive. Nobody wants to be here sitting in their chair waiting for charity, but they don't get that chance. There were, as I mentioned before to you, there are three judges in the whole state of Michigan. They cover Michigan, they cover North Ohio, part of Indiana. That just doesn't make sense.
As I said at the beginning, and some of our viewers know you guys, you have a lot of years of experience in this kind of work, immigration, refugee settlement. So what has this last couple of weeks been look like? Are people nervous? Is there anxiety? How are you guys sort of helping them through this? Who are these people? Are they hiding until you can get some paperwork for them? And how does that work?
So in my case, so I network with a lot of people who work in refugee resettlement, and one of the things that is problematic for us is that a lot of dollars that have been allocated by Congress have been revoked by the Trump administration, which is again illegal. You can't. Congress is the purse holder, right? They hold the purse strings for the money when it comes to allocating it. So you can't revoke money that's already been allocated, which is what the Trump administration has done. So how do you navigate something that's illegal and the government's doing it to you, right? But with refugee resettlement paused, many of the agencies, especially in the Lansing area, have had to pause their operations and now are having to look at scaling back what they do. Like Oscar had said, there's not really a way to gauge yet how increased the presence of ICE is in Michigan, but the perception is that all this stuff is going on. So you have a lot of nervous people. I work with families that foster refugee youth. And the families are rightfully so asking questions, and they're concerned about what's going to happen next. And you see it every day in the news. It's something new. We don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know if it's going to be a legal action or an illegal action. But if the federal government's doing the action, there's really nothing that we can do other than some organizations are filing lawsuits to stop that from happening. And we're following the news, I would say, like everybody else is.
Right. And Oscar with the Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation. So what's the landscape look like there? Detroit, Lansing, around the state where you get all over the place.
First, I want to say that I just want to be clear that I'm speaking as Oscar Castenada. No, I do not represent the voice of the organization. I want to be clear on this. What Dan said is absolutely right. People is confused and people is scared, and it not only applies to immigration. In many fronts, there's confusing, contradictory information coming every single day, multiple times a day. So it's not clear for them what is going on or what is happening, and that increases the fear and the insecurity. And something I wanted to mention is that there are so many immigrants with children who are American citizens, and I keep wondering, is there a plan for those families? Are you gonna send American citizens back to the countries where their parents came from? I know that now some people is now bringing the conversation into changing the constitution and changing who gets to be an American citizen and who doesn't. But this is a long way to go, and nobody can change the constitution just with one stroke of a pen, right? So As today, they are American citizens. So they have the rights that everybody else deserves to have as an American citizen. And what is going to happen to them? What happens if their parents get deported? It has to be a comprehensive and organized plan, and it's not there. So you listen to one thing, you listen to the next. You hear that they want to shut down USAID. How many people is going to lose jobs out of it? They want to close the Department of Education. There is confusing information all the time.
And Oscar touched on a very key word there, clarity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if 12 years ago we had immigration reform and that provided clarity to not only immigrants but to the American people about the way the system operates, it's just confusing all the way around. There's so many different misperceptions. The most common comment that I see on social media by people who support this is, well, they should come the right way. To everybody listening at home, in many cases there is no way to come because green cards, there's no process available depending on what country you're trying to immigrate from. So when it's people say come the right way, that doesn't in many cases really exist.
The president also wants to end automatic citizenship for everyone born in the U.S., known as the birthright citizenship. I think that's posturing. Can he really do that? Is that just another sort of, throwing it out there, kind of shock and awe? But that's, I'm not sure the best route to go here.
Yeah. I mean, it's clearly unconstitutional. And I mean, I'm somebody who works with, refugees as my day job, and I advocate for immigrants in my free nighttime. But it's clearly unconstitutional. I don't understand, what the point is other than, like you said, posturing.
Right.
And it's really hurtful in the sense that, as Americans, think of it from the American side of things, a lot of people, I think the number I've seen as high as 20%, have some type of familial connection that makes them a mixed status family. There's a lot of families, that they fall into that category.
Right. And you guys are a
And
product of that, right?
Sorry, and I want to say, I believe that most, from the numbers that I have seen, most Americans support immigration. What they don't want is to see messy immigration. We have to be honest that the process has been messy for a long time. But it has been messy, as I said before, because it becomes political ping pong. If there was an agreement and a consciousness of working together to fix the system, things will be different now. And this mixed messaging. I was reading today. I'm gonna use Guatemala as an example. The previous administration deported 66,000 Guatemalans in 2024. 66,000. Out of those 66,000, 3,000 had criminal backgrounds. And when they say criminal backgrounds, they don't go into details of what criminal background means. It's possible that criminal background would be to have a DUI, to steal something from Menards. I'm not saying that those are good things, but they are not rapists. They are not drug dealers. So from this huge amount of people that was deported, it's a very small slice, the one of people who are actually criminals. But what you listen in the news all the time is these horrible things about immigrants, and you see this picture of this one guy who committed a crime. Yes, he committed a crime, and he needs to be punished. But you cannot create those labels that apply to all immigrants, because this is what gets people in the defensive, thinking, why are we bringing all these horrible people to the country? They're doing bad things. We are not safe anymore. There are so many statistics and so many studies showing that immigrants are less likely to commit crimes, just for the fact that they don't want to get in trouble because they know that they could be deported.
It's like the Laken Riley story, right? Which was horrific, right? And she was murdered by an undocumented immigrant. And now they enacted the Laken Riley law that will allow law enforcement to detain any undocumented immigrant, even if he's committed, or she, burglary, theft, shoplifting. So you're saying you think it's taking that a little too far?
The big problem with the Laken Riley Act is that it triggers a deportation hearing when somebody's accused of a crime. So, in this country, obviously we have due process. If you're not convicted of a crime, how can you be punished for having committed that crime? So, another part of that act, it puts in danger people like, anybody who works for an agency that works with immigrants. If you're transporting them, if you're assisting them in any ways, it enacts new penalties for doing that sort of thing. So there's a couple of ways that it's problematic, but it had bipartisan support. And I don't understand, I guess, how legislators can approve something that eliminates due process for anybody.
Right. Well, I think.
And I'm
Go ahead,
and I'm
Oscar.
more
Go ahead.
I'm more worried about the labels that these events create. This idea of the criminalization of my community is not safe anymore because there are too many immigrants around, and that's when people get defensive. That's when they hear that so many people cross the border, but they never publish in the news how many people was sent back, and then everybody's fearing that and the word invaded has been used constantly, especially during the elections. We're being invaded. There's nothing that, more farther from the reality. And even if you look at the percent, assuming that the numbers are true, if you when you compare the volume of the immigration comparing with historical numbers, it's not that far from what it was before. We all know, and it's common expression, that the United States is a country made out of immigrants, and it's been like that always, and it's still very successful.
And the blips that, the steep rise in immigrants generally come with a presidential change administration.
Yes.
So you saw that with the Biden administration. A lot of people came, and the reasoning for them wanting to come was they thought there was going to be some type of a favorable change in the law that would allow them to come. And those have happened throughout history.
Right.
But again, nothing during that 4 years of the Biden administration that was that untypical than during Trump's years or Obama's years or George W. Bush's years.
Right. I mean, the other issue.
Not only was nothing atypical, but also was nothing unlawful. Everything was done according with the law.
Yeah. The other issue, in addition to, the justifying the mass deportations, was to reduce sort of criminal activity. And what Oscar says, well, the vast majority of people who are trying to come over don't have any kind of criminal background behavior. They're just honest, hardworking people that just want to make a better life. But he's also said he wants to cut down on human trafficking, and also to reduce the flow of fentanyl, which kills tens of thousands of Americans. So are some of those, well, those are good reasons to stop the flow. The question is, are those a little bit more overblown?
Well, nobody wants to live next door to drug dealers, rapists, violent, criminals in any way. But I mean, that's in the U.S. citizenry as well. But you touched on fentanyl, right? And you said tens of thousands, right? And that's accurate. But what number did President Trump use when he addressed fentanyl the other day? He used 300,000. And his press secretary used the number tens of millions per year.
Bit misleading. Sure.
Which is it? They're both
Right.
overblown, right? So you might get a lot of calls about this next statement, when it comes to fentanyl, Mike, But here's something that somebody propositioned real quick. Sorry, Oscar.
No.
If you wanted to stop the flow of fentanyl, you could do it tomorrow by executive order. You would switch all the southern border patrol agents with all the northern border patrol agents, swap them out for each other, because we know that fentanyl drug smuggling happens with the cooperation of corrupt federal agents. It's just a fact. And it's not something pleasant to think about or talk about, but you can't get that much drugs into the country without having some cooperation with people who are breaking the law. You would stop the flow of fentanyl for probably about 6 months if you did that. So will it happen? I don't think that's I don't think that's on the radar to happen, but realistically it would stop that.
Right.
And what I wanted to say, you are absolutely right, Dan. I agree. And the other thing is, why do we have to have these two topics in the same conversation? Why we have to be talking about immigration and drug trafficking? As you, Dan, said very well, nobody wants to have fentanyl coming to the United States, but it's not the same issue. Those are two very different issues.
Yeah. Ironically, some of these people coming are fleeing exactly that.
Right.
They don't they don't want to join a cartel.
Right.
But if the choice is, well, if I stay here, I have to join the cartel, or they'll kill my entire family. So it really is just exacerbating the problem.
Right.
But nobody wants to advocate. Nobody's going to sit here and advocate for criminals, rapists, drug dealers to be somewhere in this country.
Right.
This is not realistic.
Well, we are going to be seeing a heck of a lot more military presence at the border. President Trump ordered a couple thousand more, and then, as you guys heard this week in his tariff negotiations with the president of Mexico, he backed off on that, at least for 30 days, and President of Mexico said, well, we'll send 10,000 troops to the border. What do you make of all that? And actually, that's not the first time that we've seen more troops, coming from Mexico to come to the border? You kind of told me that earlier, right?
Yeah, in 2021, there was no threat of tariffs. There was no hard negotiations. But Mexico did send 10,000 troops to the border during the beginning of the Biden administration. Now, it was probably page 3. It wasn't page 1 like it is right now, but it's a fact. It does happen. It's just something, that happens, especially in North America with, with the cooperation of Canada, with cooperation of Mexico on a number of different issues.
Oscar, what, if anything, is that military presence going to do there, do you think? Short-term solution to a long-term problem? I don't know.
It's really good for the news at 10 p.m. And it will give beautiful shots, and it's gonna make it sound like it's working. But I am sure that they will find ways of going through. And it will make a big difference, and it's not sustainable. Are you gonna keep these 10,000 troops for forever?
Right.
Something like 20% of the people who are here, quote unquote illegally, are here on visas. They flew on a plane,
Yes.
they came on a visa, and they overstayed their visa.
Sure.
So
Yes.
a border wall and troops at the border aren't going to do anything about that.
So we got about 5 or 6 minutes left. I want to segue a little bit. I think it's important for our viewers to understand the impact of foreign-born workforce and what they bring to the economy, including a lot of undocumented immigrants who are actually accounted for and actually paying taxes. So we've got some graphic information. There's the first one, foreign-born workforce.
Yeah. So one of the big things that we should keep in mind is how many people are actually being employed. So this comes from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and you're talking about 29.1 million people, or 18.6% of the labor force, and that's up about 0.5% from the year before. So you're talking about a large number of people in the fruit and vegetable industry, dairy, meat, all these things are being affected. It came out in the news today that there's a program in Detroit, I think it's called Hey Detroit or something like that, and it gives free fruits and vegetables to people in the Detroit area. And they had to cease operations because of an ice raid that happened, I think, in the Texas area. So the effects are already being seen. You've heard some stories about the citrus crop in California, and those things are going to really start hitting here in the next few months.
And some of these people on the second graphic that you've got there, while they're undocumented, some of which we know who they are, and they're actually paying taxes.
Yeah, they're actually paying taxes. When I always, it's funny because, somebody who's undocumented, they can't go into a store and not pay sales tax, right? We all pay sales tax, right? So they have to pay sales tax.
And they have a tax ID.
Right, and the employer, is going to pay taxes. They're going to have a tax ID in many different situations depending on their status. So taxes are being paid to the tune of $382.9 billion in federal taxes and $196.3 billion in state and local taxes. So that's a big chunk, that's not.
And
that's not,
they don't collect benefits.
right, and they don't receive any of the benefits because they're not citizens. So they're literally subsidizing a lot of the programs that help U.S. citizens.
And we've got a third. Go ahead.
Quick, and I was reading. I'm a little bit worried about quoting because I'm not 100% sure, but I believe it's in Oregon. They said that out of each 100 jobs, for each 100 jobs that are available today, there are 49 people. That leaves 51 jobs that nobody's going to apply for multiple reasons. But number one is because people doesn't want to. People is doing other things, and there's more industry, more work. Who's going to take those jobs? Maybe you have to pay much more, and maybe in Michigan, if you do this, your gallon, like with all those farms where they work in the milk industry, maybe your gallon of milk is gonna cost you $12 when you raise the salaries to make it attractive to people to get jobs.
And if you're able to work something out, and it's honestly doesn't appear like that's going to happen anytime soon.
Right.
But if you were to agree to some type of immigration reform, give these folks a pathway to citizenship, that's just going to add to the number of people paying taxes. Which who couldn't use what state couldn't use more tax dollars to do some of the things that they want to do, like, hey, fix the roads in Michigan, that sort of thing. And that doesn't happen, with the system that we have right now.
And Dan is being generous. He's saying give them green cards.
Yeah.
A lot of folks, they just want to have an opportunity to work, and they're gonna go back to their countries and to their communities. Give
Yeah.
them work permits. Give them working permits and let them save for the future.
And that's something that's almost never talked about. A lot of immigrants who are here working, their intention is not to stay here for the rest of their lives. They're here for a number of years to work, and then maybe they want to go start a business in their home country.
Yes.
Not everybody that comes here is intent on staying here for the rest of their life.
And that was the question I was going to finish with you guys. You kind of already went into it. You've been at this work a long time. You've gone all over the state, heck, all over the country for that matter. And if you were in charge, if you had advice for the Trump administration, what are some things that you would say that might help? That, because this, as you said, the system's broken. We've been playing this dog and pony show for administration after administration. So what are some things that we could maybe do?
Create a pathway to citizenship.
Right.
It's if everybody knows how to become a citizen, whether it's people who are currently in other nations or people who are here now working with them, if there's a clear path, if there's, this is the way the system works and not all this confusion and chaos, I think that would solve a lot of problems. It would solve a lot of budgetary problems, perception problems. It's a win-win if we can figure this out, I think, for everybody.
Yes. I say, as I said before, I'm following Dan's line because I agree with him 100%. Give them working permits, give them the opportunity to work lawfully, and everybody's gonna win.
Right. And that's kind of what our country was made on, right? A little bit. We like to bring people here, but it needs to be controlled.
Yeah.
I don't know if we need additional cooperation from some surrounding countries to team up, but hopefully we'll get there someday. And with your help, guys, I know you're helping those folks that need to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
And that's our show for tonight, but be sure to join us again next week right here for the follow-up. A lot more of us are suffering from mental health issues, but afraid to talk about it. Next week, we'll focus on mental health and what's being done to face it head on. In the meantime, hit me up on social media or dial into our follow-up hotline. We'd really like to hear from you. Thanks for joining us tonight. Have a great night. We will see you here next week on the follow-up. Welcome to the follow-up after show, kind of a web extra for our viewers that watched the big show with our guests, and it was all about immigration. And we have a lot more to talk about with our guests that joined us in the big show, and they join us as well on the after show. Oscar Castenada, he is joining us virtually from the Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation, and Daniel Soza, refugee team lead, Samaritas Refugee Services. One of the issues we did not bring up when we talked about immigration and everything that Trump is doing, deporting all kinds of people. There seems to be this feeling in the country around folks that on the immigration issue that American citizens are losing jobs to immigrants, undocumented immigrants. True or false? Who wants to take that first?
I would say false in terms of the jobs, in terms of high-paying jobs. Generally, people who are undocumented are going to work jobs in restaurants, in dairy, in meatpacking, in jobs that a lot of Americans are just not going to do. There was a group of growers who tried to get people who had lost their jobs in the auto industry to work in the fields, picking fruits and vegetables.
Nice day.
Yeah, and I think, they tried it with a few hundred people, and I think only one person wound up sticking with it. I don't know how long it was for. Everybody else quit after one day. And the guy just loved being outside, and I guess, he took to it or whatever, but not many people are going to do that sort of thing. With the bigger concern, and there are some cases where Americans are losing opportunities and jobs, but it's not in those industries, it's in things like engineering, right? Elon Musk is getting a lot of press nowadays, and he came out very strongly in favor of the H-1B visa. So that's for people who come here who have a special skill, like say a computer engineer who wants to work at his company, right? So in those situations, somebody can come on one of those visas, but they're going to be very restricted in what they'll earn. So like an American engineer, computer engineer is going to earn a lot more and expect a lot more than somebody coming from, say, India to work on those. They're going to work and they're going to get paid at the very lowest end of what that industry pays. And if there's some type of a problem, I'm not going to speculate as to what kind of problems can come up, but if there's a problem, they'll lose that visa and get deported. So it's almost like, in some ways, like indentured servitude.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it's very problematic. The First Lady came here on a visa that's, I don't know if it's an H-1B visa, but it's a visa that somebody can get, again, that has a special skill. I don't know what Melania Trump's special skill is. I'm not going to speculate, but that's the visa she came on, and that's the visa she was approved for and was able to become an American citizen eventually from.
And if you cannot, if you get an offer from another company, you cannot take your visa with you. You depend on that company, and so yes, that is
That visa's
and
100%
what
tied to the company.
what I wanted to say is that so I don't think that the bad feelings are that much about losing jobs as than losing quality of life. And what I was mentioning before was that there is a segment of the American population that is feeling left behind, and probably you can argue that yeah, it is true that the quality of life is not as good as a 1 or 2 generations ago, but those problems are much more complex and have to do with many more factors. And one of them, in a small scale, might be immigration and the advent of workers from different countries. But when the political conversation comes, everything gets convoluted and creates those biases and creates those you have to say racist feelings and bad feelings about people who is coming, and especially people who doesn't look like you.
29 million people will always create a lot of jobs. They're going to eat, they're going to shop, they're going to buy cars, they're going to rent homes. They create, millions and billions in business. So, the idea that it's a negative impact on the economy, I've yet to see something that has made me think that it's in any way negatively impact the American economy.
The other side to this, a lot of Trump's critics have said that this kind of thing, we're talking about mass deportation and detaining people for little or no crimes, can lead to somewhat of a racial profiling. Some are calling it racist fear-mongering, and in some cases, in the ongoing efforts by ICE to round up people, maybe some innocent people are getting caught up in all of this. What do you make of that? Singling out people who may or may not be targets, should not be targets.
Well, there's definitely been stories in the news where they've been detained. There was a gentleman in New Jersey who was detained, who was a citizen, he was a veteran, but he was of the brown persuasion, so to speak. Historically, obviously, the United States hasn't always had the greatest history when it comes to racial relations, but it's happened significantly a couple of times. Once in the 1930s, around the time of the Great Depression, we needed those foreign workers from Mexico, and it boosted the economy and helped dig us out of the Great Depression. And that was called the Bracero program. It was a program that brought people in specifically from Mexico to do that work. So when the tides turned, a lot of people were deported in one big operation, in a mass deportation. Several thousand American citizens, Mexican-American citizens, were also deported during that operation. There was also something in the 1950s called Operation Wetback, which is, again, a mass deportation. I don't know as much about that as I do the Bracero program, but there's a couple of times in history where these mass deportations of Mexicans specifically that have happened, where people were racially profiled and citizens were actually deported.
And also happened with Chinese populations before.
Yes, Chinese
when
as
they
well.
brought this mass amount of Chinese folks to work in the railroad industry, and then they didn't want them anymore.
Yeah.
History keeps repeating itself here.
And we're looking at things from a 2025 lens, right? 1925, 1935, documentation was not what it is today. There's no computer systems to track people. so many less people had IDs and that sort of thing, or birth certificates. A lot of people didn't have a birth certificate 100 years ago. So, it was a lot easier to do that sort of thing.
Well, hopefully we can have some middle ground, as we talked about beforehand. You're either on one side or you're on the other, and it's hard to have a discussion like this because people just, it's extreme, right? And I pray that we can find some middle ground, and the system that is broken, somehow we can come together and fix it. It's going to take some time.
It's not clear.
Thank you. Oscar Castenada, Daniel Soza, once again, thank you. Great conversation, and appreciate your expertise.
Thank you for the space, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to discuss these matters that are so important for Dan and for me.
You bet. Keep up the good work.
See you, Oscar.
And thank you for joining us on the After Show.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And make sure to click that bell icon to stay notified when we upload new content. Videos like this are only possible because of viewers like you. To help support this channel, click on the link in the description below. We'll see you next time.